Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the East Division preview. What are we doing with this?
Can't we just call it the Metro?
Can we call it the Metro? It's the Metro teams, right? I mean,
yeah. Is there a change?
Boston,
or Columbus.
Boston's not is he in the Atlantic normally,
right?
but is Buffalo?
This is what the Metro I feel like should be.
Yes, this is what the
right?
Metro should be, in my opinion. Why is Columbus in the Metro? They're not.
I don't know.
It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, this lineup, I'm actually kind of a hot take. I kind of hope they keep some semblance of these divisions going forward. I think the rivalry aspect of it will be really cool. The lack of travel aspect will be cool. The back-to-back games will be interesting to see teams get used to each other. I'm kind of curious to see how it works out because I have an inkling that if it goes really, really well, we could see some of this stick in the future. I don't know how much of it, maybe a little bit.
Yeah. I don't know about the Canadian teams. That seems like a stretch.
That seems like a stretch, but I do love it. I love the idea of a Canadian division. It's so exciting. I mean, we kind of talked about that on the last episode, but again, here I am praising the idea of the Canadian division. Now, before we get into it really quick, the last thing to mention here, or this is the last call for listener leagues. We've narrowed down the details. We'll be in every single league. It'll be a 16-player roster, 2 centers, 2 left wing, 2 right wing, 4 defensemen, 2 forward slots, 2 utility slots, and 2 goaltending slots. So no bench, which is really nice.
And 3 IR plus.
And 3 IR plus for 1 extra for COVID, essentially. And it'll be really nice with no bench because that means that this is just... Because we understand that like a lot of people that are listening to us already in other leagues. And so with no bench, at least it gets a little bit easier from a management standpoint. You don't have to set your lines every single day. You'll still get points. So it still remains really competitive and you get rewarded for picking people up. But you don't get penalized for just not being able to do something that day, which is really nice because we know this is just an added league on top, right? So the last call, January 1st is the deadline unless you reach out to us. I know like some people are getting paid on January 1st and that they wanted to wait until that, things like that. So if you reach out to us, we can be a little bit flexible. If you sign up for Patreon or become a YouTube member, there's already a forum out there. You can find it in Discord if you're a Patreon member or on Patreon. Or if you're a YouTube member, you can either find it in the Discord or we posted something to the community tab to let you pick when you'd like to draft. And from there, we'll build out the drafts and we'll be sending those out. I mean, some drafts will be starting as soon as this weekend. So definitely something to join up in if you want to. By the time you're listening to this, it might already be closed. But we wanted to mention it for those people that, kind of the first comment people, we see you all. Don't worry. We appreciate you. So that is the last thing on the listener leagues. Just wanted to give you the last call there. And otherwise, not really much else. I think that's it. Let's get into this. And on top of that, I think this is the last episode before New Year's. So I know it's been a really weird year, but this last year for us has been absolutely incredible in terms of if you consider last season. I mean, we never got to say thanks or goodbye even. The season just kind of abruptly ended. So we never got to say...
Well, we could have, and then we abruptly
but we abruptly ended because everything else abruptly ended in the world. There's
a lot of abrupt endings.
But also abrupt beginnings. And we're off to a flying start thanks to you all listening to us and watching us. And, I mean, last season, you just made our numbers skyrocket. And we got attention from different people. And a lot of people noticed us, and it was really cool to see. And it was really awesome to hear about people that were winning their leagues and that were at the top. And so I guess at the end of the day, just trying to say, thank you for being with us in 2020 and also for last season. And it was really, really awesome to have you all on board. And I'm really excited for 2021 and what's ahead for this specific season because I think it's going to be a real cracker given how different the divisions are. So a huge thank you from us. Anything to add, sir?
Yeah.
Co-host?
I got nothing to add.
No, it's me.
Thanks. Thanks for listening. Right?
Thanks for listening. The thing we usually say at the end, but now we're saying it at the beginning.
Just end it.
End it. That's it. That's the East preview.
5-minute
Congrats.
podcast.
Okay, so let's jump into the first team here in the East Division, and that's going to be the Boston Bruins. Easily, in my opinion, the top team in this division. I think.
Yep.
By quite a bit, I think. And then it's kind of next best after that. I would say for the most part, at least.
There's a fairly steep drop as well.
There is. I mean, I think Boston could clean up in this division, honestly. I think.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's as easy as it seems either. I think these teams that they compete against are not exactly, going to lie down. I don't think they're as easy as it seems. I think they are going to give Boston some trouble at times, and Boston did struggle sometimes last season. I don't think it's going to be that crazy. I think they're going to finish first for sure. But I do think that there will be some hiccups here. I could see Philly giving them a run for their money. I could see Pittsburgh causing them fits. I could even see the Rangers causing them fits, honestly, at times. And then there's the Sabres. But anyways, the Boston Bruins, in my opinion, the best.
Washington.
And Washington, of course. How did I forget about Washington? Duh. And especially now that they added Chara. So let's get into the Boston Bruins and talk about, I'll let you start off first with the first fantasy relevant player there in Brad Marchand going at 27.1 ADP.
Yeah, I have updated numbers, so he is moving up.
He is. Okay.
He's at 26
okay,
now.
Perfect. He moved up one pick.
Yeah, but the thing that I find interesting about Boston just as like a whole is I'm kind of surprised that there's so much value to be had. Like I get that people are like a little bit worried about injuries and stuff, and not everybody on this team is a value pick or anything. But I don't think anybody's egregiously out of line. And I think that there is a lot of value in Marchand's one, like even at, we're talking about, a second beginning of the third round pick, technically at 26 or so, but he's not, I've read one article that he's going to miss time in the season. And I found no source of that. And I don't really know if there's any reporting that he's actually going to miss game time, but last I saw, he's still slated to be, his recovery window is right around the start of the season. So maybe you miss a week. If you're unlucky, maybe you miss 2. But that doesn't matter, in my opinion. Like, if 2 weeks costs you the entire season, I don't know. It's one player in 2 weeks. It seems like a bit much for me to knock him down. What I would think is an entire round that early on with how much value he has.
I agree.
Mike is totally messed up. Completely messed up.
There we go. Oops. My mic messed up, so there might be a little bit of a weird cut there, but whatever. So Brad Marchand, I agree. Everything is in line. I mean, it's crazy to me. I've seen some people be like, oh, well, how can you put Brad Marchand at a sleeper? I mean, it doesn't matter if he misses 2 weeks, right? Like you said, if you are losing the season on 2 weeks, there's other problems on your team. And quite frankly, Brad Marchand was never going to fix them to begin with, right? And so I think that this pick especially, the idea of Brad Marchand being a sleeper, that pick benefits people who know how they're drafting, especially, right? Like, I think it benefits anyone. There's value there. But especially if you know what you're doing in the draft, it benefits you a ton, right? So I like Brad Marchand a lot. I think, we're going to see the same Brad Marchand that we've seen before. The over point per game pace, insane over point per game pace, lots of power play points, the usual Brad Marchand silly stuff, And I think the other player we'll see the same from once he comes back is David Pastrnak. I actually think I like David Pastrnak more than Brad Marchand this year. Just if they were equal, they were starting the season equal. I like David Pastrnak over Brad Marchand.
Not in PIM leagues, but
not
beyond
in
that,
PIMS leagues. PIMS league is the only one. In points leagues, I like him more. In points only leagues, I like him more. In standard Yahoo, I like him more. It's close, but I mean, you also can't ignore David Pastrnak's shot pace. And on top of that, actually, what's really interesting is that,
and he's a goal scorer.
Yeah, last season actually, David Pastrnak destroyed Brad Marchand in power play points. Pastrnak got 38, whereas Marchand only got 28. That's a big difference there, especially if you count power play points. So something to consider. I mean, one thing that's just insane from Pastrnak is that he shoots at 25% on the power play, and his career is sort of at around that 20% mark. So he's just an insanely good power play shooter, and that's what makes a big difference for him compared to Brad Marchand. But that's really kind of it about David Pastrnak, I think. There's not much to say there.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is I think both those players, so Pasternak's at like 44 or so. He's a great grab. I mean, you are going to miss time with him, so you're going to be looking at a replacement level player for probably the first 4 weeks or so, but still very much worth it, in my opinion. If you survive those 4 weeks without getting totally pushed through the mud, then you're in a really good spot to be like not just in the playoffs, but like winning the league.
Can I also, I think another thing to mention here is just something funny about like a guy like David Pastrnak, right? How many times in this season, I mean, last year, I remember my team suffered a slew of injuries. I remember I lost Malkin and a few other big guys, and like, I was okay. And when that happens in the middle of the season, you kind of deal with it, you learn to deal with it, and you work around it. Why are we so scared of doing that early on? I get that I get that you. I know. I know you're all about it, but I'm talking just in general. People tend to be really afraid about it. I've seen many a good manager navigate through many injuries and remain first, right? Like, I've seen that multiple times, and I bet all, people listening have too. I've seen managers who just, holy crap, you have a ton of injuries and you still navigate through it. I'd argue that you can do the same thing from the very start of the season and pick up on value from a guy like David Pastrnak who's going to come back. And if you play your cards right, you could be in first when David Pastrnak comes back and just dominate. So that's just kind of, I think, a lot of people sometimes mention, oh, well, it's risky and whatever. But this happens during the season. I mean, you lose players and then you got to make it work. It's no different than when it happens in the middle of the season. It's just at the beginning. At least that's kind of my take on that. The next guy up here.
I want to talk about the center here of this line
of course.
in Patrice Bergeron. 41.2. Like, this is the first season that I think his ADP is correct.
Yes, I agree.
He always shoots a lot. He always has good power play points and shots. And it seems like most seasons people just don't care for some reason. Like, forget, like, they just assume he's 1 year older, so knock him down around or whatever it is. This year he's moving back up. The funny thing is, at 41.2, like, that's just like right. So it's not like a steal or anything. Like, if you draft Bergeron at 41.2, like, you did good.
Yeah.
But you didn't like make a steal or nothing super special about that.
I mean, yeah, you think about who's going around there, right? You have Tavares going just like 10 picks below. There's a lot of centers. I mean, that's the big thing too, is like the fact that he's a center matters quite a bit in terms of like how much value you're really getting at that position at that point in the draft.
I would love for him to be my first center.
Same. I wouldn't hate it either. And I think by that point, I think the only question I'd have, is that at about 41 is where really good defensemen are going. I think I'd rather have a defenseman over. Maybe I'm crazy here. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that.
It depends on
it's tough. It depends what you've done in the draft prior.
You could have gotten a defenseman in the second or third, potentially.
I mean, that's actually a
good
thought. I've been thinking about this recently. Is like the fact that you can get a defenseman in like the second or third round, maybe third round, and then in the fourth round, there's a slew of good centers there. Like if you haven't gotten your 1C yet, kind of an interesting thing. And then I guess that's really. You might have written down more forwards. Honestly, for me, at least from a draft perspective, I didn't see other forwards that are worth it from a drafting perspective in non-super deep leagues.
I think the next person that people will think about is DeBrusk. Yeah. I'm not super high on DeBrusk. I mean, we've seen him get plenty of opportunities, and he's always kind of like fine for a streamer position. That's about it. I think that what might be interesting is if Kasha replaces Pastrnak on the top right wing for a period of time. He could be a short-term ad. So he might be somebody you grab in the last round, especially if he's playing that top right wing, and then like once Pastrnak comes back, he basically loses all value. Yeah. But we're talking about a guy that's going to be second right wing, power play 2, turning into top right wing with Bergeron and Marchand probably, and probably power play 1. That's a big upgrade.
And talk about
for a guy that likes to shoot as well.
The fact that you can probably get him while Pasta's out, right? If you end up drafting Pasta, I would probably prioritize maybe Kasha or DeBrusk, depending on who gets that top power play spot. DeBrusk, I think, might get a shot at it, but he's gotten a lot of power play time before.
Oh, he'll be there. He's always on top power play. It just never matters.
Yeah. He got 55% of the team's power play 2 years ago, only got 11 power play points. Last year, he went down to 45% of the team's power play percentage and got 10 power play points. So, I don't know. I don't know if I love it. Kasha also had a terrible shooting season last year. He only shot at 4.8%. Just awful. We can move on to defensemen now. I think that's kind of it, right? I don't think there's really.
I really only have one defenseman on here. It's Charlie McAvoy.
Well, I also included Grzelcyk. Just as a flyer.
I have Grzelcyk as well, but like as a true maybe if he gets power play 1. But McAvoy, I feel like I've gone in depth on him enough in the busts or not the busts in the sleepers episode. His ADP is 110.5. That's like very good value for what I think he can give you. The biggest downside with McAvoy is his lack of shots, but they've been coming up. So considering the fact he gets about half a point a game just at even strength is pretty good news for him, especially if he gets that power play 1 slot. Like I've mentioned before, he can be very, very good this season. So he's one of my targets late, especially if I have my shots all set, which I usually do by that point in the draft.
Yeah. He also hits and blocks pretty well too, actually.
Big hits, very good peripherals, just not great shots.
160 hit pace last year and 160 block pace, very balanced. So he's definitely someone that late, like to me, he's a definite sleeper and someone that I would love to take a flyer on, especially if you've already kind of sorted out your top 2 defensemen. He's a great third defenseman option, honestly.
That's what I did in the mock draft that we've done so far.
I
got as my third.
Love him as my third defenseman. I know I'm going to be battling you in our actual league to try to get McAvoy. I hate that.
Yep.
This is going to be interesting. I feel like more so than past years, me and you know exactly who we like and are going to be targeting the same people. Although we've never been close in a draft since we started the podcast. We've never drafted, I think, kind of back-to-back or anything. So maybe this is the year. Goaltenders now, Tuukka Rask, Yaroslav Halak. Not much to say. I think Tuukka Rask is one of the best goaltenders in this draft. I just don't know if I love his ADP at 30. And not because I think that's the right value for Tuukka Rask there. I don't know if at 35 I really want to be spending on a goaltender, given what's there.
So I think what's interesting here is Halak. I mean, we know Rask is not a huge volume starter. Halak will get a good volume, and Halak is being drafted 148.
That's pretty wild.
So there's a pretty interesting idea to just ignore Rask and get basically mini Rask way later. Like, Halak's numbers were very good, and he plays enough.
There's also a case for getting Halak and getting Rask and ignoring all goaltenders until Halak, but I don't like that move.
Yeah. You could also get the tandem. I mean, considering how late Halak's going, that's not a bad option.
Not. I think the thing is, like we've seen, right? Like I think it'll be more of a 50-50 split this year between Halak and Rask.
Yeah.
So what is that worth to you is the big question. I think one thing I don't like about Rask at 35.9 in leagues that count saves, the Bruins don't let in a lot of shots. So a lot of times you'll see Rask have games where there's not a lot of saves on the table. It's normally like, a 24 save game, a 22 save game, something like that. He's not a big, occasionally, there'll be a big save game, but normally it's a pretty low shot volume game. So he doesn't offer you the start volume. He also doesn't really offer you the save volume. So I don't know if I like him at 35.9. Then we move on.
Yeah, it depends on if you need volume. I think in standard leagues, he's pretty
he's pretty good in standard leagues, I'd say. Then we move on to the Buffalo Sabres. A bit to talk about here. A little bit.
One thing that's interesting before we get into that is I feel like no other team has as much to talk about as Boston does. So bear with us.
It's all these other guys. I think there's some stuff to talk about, but no one has the firepower. That being said, I do find some
fantasy depth.
I do find some things interesting in the Metro Division. I'm calling it the Metro Division. I don't care. The interesting thing about the Metro Division is more so to me that the playing field feels very even after Washington, Pittsburgh. Well, I would say Pittsburgh is pretty even actually now with the Isles and the Rangers. Maybe not the Rangers. The Rangers suck monsters, but they sometimes play good hockey. It feels even-ish. I feel like everyone can compete outside of Boston is kind of and Philly, I guess, are in their own league, and then everyone else I think can compete.
I don't know. Philly will. As much as I like them, I mean, we saw them.
They were incredible last year.
Get kind of beaten up by the Islanders.
Yeah, but they were incredible last year. During the regular season, at least.
Oh, the end of the year. Yeah. I think I agree with you that I feel like Boston is the most complete team, and because of that, they're going to be very difficult to beat for any of these teams. And all the other teams, in my opinion, have a weakness where Boston just kind of doesn't.
I agree.
Or multiple weaknesses.
So starting with the Buffalo Sabres here, let's talk about the first guy, the most draftable guy. Man, I can't speak right now. Jack Eichel. I think he's going at 10 ADP. I think he's going right around where he should. It makes sense to me. He gets a high amount of the power play percentage. Lots of power play points last year, 27. Tons of shots from the year before. So I would love to see his shots come back up. I'm not 100% sure why that happened, actually. Doesn't really make that
It'll be
much
interesting
sense.
to see how he meshes with Hall.
Yeah, there's that too, and see how he meshes. But I think, point per game pace or better is what you expect from a guy like Eichel, and more shots, hopefully. But like you said, now that Hall's there, maybe Hall steals a little bit more of the shot share. I don't fully expect it.
I'm kind of under the impression that Hall's arrival could mean more shots for both of them, actually. I think they may just control play more because he's got a more solidified wing now. Eichel has basically been on an island. It's like he plays with Olofsson, who had up and down. He plays with Reinhart, who is fine, but he hasn't played with anybody truly elite yet.
Yes.
And I think Hall and Eichel is going to be.
I think it'll be
I don't know who they're going to put on that right wing, but boy, are they going to benefit.
I think it's going to be a huge line. I think we're going to see them just crush. I think Reinhart is an option up there. Olofsson is an option.
Yeah.
Oh, Olofsson's more of a left wing, isn't he?
No, he plays both.
Does he?
So
Okay.
Daily Faceoff has him slated up there. I assume it's going to be Reinhart.
I don't
But Dylan Cousins is an option as
Interesting.
well. There's I don't really expect it, but it's
This is
possible.
honestly the right way to talk about all these teams in the Metro, pretty much, except for Washington and maybe like Pittsburgh, because it's how it feels. Like we have no idea, and all these guys that could be interesting, at least forward. Like Taylor Hall and Eichel are the two that make the most sense. Skinner, ignore. I don't like Skinner at all this year. I think he's dead in the water.
No.
But Taylor Hall to me is actually really interesting because if you look at his numbers from last year, do you know what his shooting percentage was last year? Where all things
Something
go
horrible.
to die in Arizona, 6.9% shooting. Can you believe that?
Mm-hmm.
Like Taylor Hall with that shooting percentage, it's nuts. 30% drop from the year
Yeah,
before that.
I do think he's gonna have a great rebound year.
I do too. I think he could have a huge rebound year.
His
playing with
ADP is
Eichel.
so good too.
Yeah, it's so much value. I think I had it. I didn't update it, but 53.1. What is it at now? You updated it, I think.
53.1.
Same,
But
okay.
I think I got it off the same
Okay,
chart.
yeah,
so
yeah.
he
So
may
you might have gone up a little bit,
moved a
but
little bit,
even then, regardless of where he's at, I mean, the shot pace is just ridiculous. I love Taylor Hall. I think there's an interesting scenario where you ignore Jack Eichel again because the position thing, center, and you try to get Taylor Hall, and you still get in on Eichel. I think that there is a move there to where you ignore Jack Eichel this year at 10, and you pay attention to Taylor Hall a little bit later on. I do think there's something there. And as training camp goes on, definitely you got to pay attention to Victor Olofsson, Sam Reinhart, Dylan Cousins, see who gets that top right wing spot. Although I will say that from last year we learned people don't keep that spot for whatever reason. It might be different this year.
Yeah.
But that slot moves around a lot. So I wouldn't be drafting, say, a Reinhart or an Olofsson or whatever, expecting them to keep that top right wing. I consider it a flux position, and that's kind of why I don't like Reinhardt at 96.8. Just given
it's too high.
other people that we've talked about at that rank, right, that are more secure.
Too early, rather.
Yeah, it feels a little too early for Sam Reinhart, given that we just don't know if he's going to actually be able to keep it. If he does keep it, I think he could be massive, but there is a lot of risk there. Low floor, very high ceiling. It's a little bit too risky for me at 96.8, I think, given what else is around that ADP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving into the fence,
Yeah.
I looked at this. I actually don't think I like Darlene at 75.1. I'm
Really?
I really need him to shoot more. Like his hits are okay, but he doesn't have any peripherals, and he's going to have a serious point pace to make up for
his point pace last year was great.
it was
56.
okay.
56 pretty good for a defenseman.
Sure, but 75.1, he's going to be somebody's first defenseman probably.
Sure.
I think that puts him in the top 12 or top 10.
I think he's going right around value. Maybe a little bit of a
Where does that put him? I don't mind. Okay, it's going to be second. He's moved down actually. He's at 81 now, so
that's good. I think he's.
I think that's sort of makes sense.
I think that's about right.
But I would take Neil Pionk over him, for
Oh
example.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, I would take Pionk over him for sure. And then there's Risto. He's a tough one to me.
Yeah.
Because I think his points are going to suffer a lot.
Yeah.
His points suffer a lot. His shot pace actually went down a lot last season. His hit pace,
Yeah, it's following his ice
yeah,
time.
his hit pace still
so.
really good. His block pace dropped about the same as his shots. Again, ice time. That's pretty much what it is. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
just something to pay attention to. I mean, one thing that Darlene also has, the reason he doesn't shoot so much is because his ice time. It went down from 21 to 19. So that's the big thing, too, with Darlene to pay attention to is the ice time with them both. I think Risto at 136, 137-ish, maybe a little high because I'd rather have Nurse, right? I'd rather have a Nurse.
Yeah, but I would rather have Nurse as well.
It just kind of comes down to what you're drafting there for. I think if you're drafting at that position at 136 for a peripheral defenseman, I don't think Risto's your guy anymore. I think you can do better.
Yeah, he's okay. If Nurse is gone, he still fills.
I don't
holes
remember
in
where
a way.
Weber's going. I'd rather have Weber.
Way higher than
right?
this.
Yeah. I'd rather have Petrie.
Yeah, he's like 90
I'd
something.
rather have Petrie.
Petrie's also higher.
Is he higher? Oh, he's going like one.
Oh, yeah.
What was he, like 112?
Petrie's going
112?
113.
113? Okay.
Yeah.
I guess my point is just if you're going for peripheral defenseman, I think there's better options than Risto. Maybe I'm not saying the right names here, but there's
Risto's
better options.
I think he still has value, especially in PIM leagues and
Yeah,
stuff.
PIM
but-
leagues maybe is the only one. Otherwise, his hits aren't that great, honestly. His hit pace is fantastic.
They're pretty good.
241 pace last year.
It's his other
pretty
ones
good.
that aren't
It's
so
other
good
ones that
anymore.
aren't that good. Okay. His block pace went down. His shot pace went down. It's his hits that are great. So if you need hits, I guess it's there. But I don't love him this year like I have in the past. Goaltenders, Do we really need to talk about them? I hate them.
I literally
They
am
suck.
not.
I don't want to talk about them. They suck. I'm not touching either of these two goaltenders. Just toss them in a trash can and sell them. Moving on to the Islanders, who do have good goaltenders. Let's start with the goaltenders, actually, because I feel like this has happened now.
Are we skipping the Devils?
Oh my God, I completely skipped the Devils. That's very Ranger fan of me. I don't even have them on my sheet.
Well, it's not a big problem considering there is nobody worth drafting on that team.
There's nobody.
My first line here says, "It is a wasteland over here."
I mean, that also defines
the only
Jersey.
player. Yeah. Well, God, here we go again. But the only player on here that has like a respectable ADP is Kyle Palmieri, and I don't like his ADP. It's 116, and that's way too early for somebody that has nothing really going for him.
Yeah, and the thing with Palmieri,
it's 176 on ESPN, which is an interesting difference.
On
there.
ESPN, I love him. I love that ADP at 170-ish.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
super late. I'm not taking him in the middle of the draft.
The problem with Palmieri is his team around him. It sucks. I mean, Jack Hughes, just not good. I don't see how he takes that step forward. A lot of people have asked us about PK Subban. I don't like PK Subban this year.
I would not draft anybody on this team, including Palmieri. Like Palmieri, maybe if it's like the 16th round and he's still hanging around and I need a right wing.
Goaltenders are maybe the only one I'd look at. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. And even then,
Blackwood's okay, but we don't know how much time Crawford's going to take.
They might not even get drafted. They might not even be drafted. Drafted. They might not even get drafted. Like Crawford and Blackwood is probably going to end up just on the waiver, and so you can pay attention to what they're doing. I don't think you have to draft them. So I think, the Devils this year, I don't think we've ever in our division previews had a team where I don't have a single player to recommend drafting. I think it's happened.
Messaged you offhand, and I before we did this, and I said, I actually think the Devils are the worst fantasy team I have ever seen.
Yes.
The 2021 Devils.
Truly
They're just
a wasteland. It is so bad.
I think the only other player that maybe finds his way somewhere, I mean, you could say Nico Hischier, but he's actually out hurt to begin with, and like he's whatever. He's fine. There's again, center's so deep. It's like, how do you even find room for him? But is Damon Severson potentially? If he gets power play 1, he showed some flashes. I still don't really like him, but he could be a potential 5th defenseman or something in some leagues. Streamer, whatever.
It's just, that is truly a wasteland. That's a great way to define it. And I won't get into the actual physical wasteland because I think that might make people angry, but it's okay. Now let's go to the fishbowl.
I mean, there's really nothing else to say. I'll just take us. I'll take us into the Islanders.
I'm done.
Here.
Let's go to your team. There's nothing to say.
Unfortunately, the situation over there is fairly similar. There's like a couple players you can call out, but for the most part, there's a lot of the team is like the people you draft if your draft went 20 rounds or something, except for the goalies.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why once again their goalies are going like crazy late. Like what?
I think what happens.
What do they need to do?
Here's what I think happens. I think that year over year the Isles have had such a good goaltending performance that everyone just says, "Oh, it's a one-off. It's a one-off. They can't keep that going." But what people don't, and we said this last year too, what people don't understand, it's the Trot system. It's how they're playing that is benefiting these goaltenders. Plus, they have Mitch Korn coaching them. So there's a lot of things working in their favor. And the same as we see in the Rangers. When we look at the Rangers, the same thing happens, right? Benoit Lair is there coaching the goaltenders, and it seems like every goaltender that comes through the system just works. And in many ways, that's what's happening with Mitch Korn too. We saw a huge drop-off in performance of the Washington Capitals when Mitch Korn left. He plays a huge factor. And so I don't think it's just a random fluke. I do trust Varlamov and Sorokin quite a bit. The question is to me, how much do either play? That's my big question. And for that reason, I kind of like them as a tandem. And I mean, Semyon Varlamov going at 155 and Ilya Sorokin going at 165. Whew.
You could finish your draft with. You could go all the way to the end of the draft with no goalies and just take those two.
Those feel
in standard cats leagues
like a steal to me.
Yeah,
and
Sorokin, I get like he's untested, but Varlamov, I don't understand how is this happening again? He was a sleeper last season, and he owned up to that sleeper like designation. He played great, and he's basically got the exact same.
The
ADP.
only thing people can say is, "Oh well, I'm afraid of Sorokin stealing his space." In which case, Sorokin should be going higher. but that's not the case
Yeah,
here.
just take Sorkin then, too. I don't
Exactly,
know.
but they both are
Right.
falling. It makes no sense. Whatever. I like both their goaltenders. I think they're incredible.
Yep.
I am absolutely looking to add one of them in my drafts towards the end, or perhaps the tandem. It kind of depends on how the rest of my draft goes, honestly. But I do love that tandem a lot, especially in safe percentage of goals against average leagues. Okay, so when we go to the forwards, there's a few people to talk about. Really, the two to me that stand out are Anders Lee and Matthew Barzal.
Yep.
The Isles,
I think Barzell's ADP is high.
yes.
Honestly, or early.
I mean, I like it. Considering how deep centers are, you could wait quite a bit and grab Barzell, and I feel good about it. I don't like his power play points.
I
He
don't-
only got 12 last year.
I don't like his power play points. I don't like his peripherals. I
Yeah.
don't like shots.
He's a
His points are all right, but he needs more.
he's a worse Elias Pettersson.
Much worse.
Much worse Elias Pettersson.
Although I think the funny thing is, the way I think about Barzell is this year and probably, I mean, I don't know. What needs to happen is he needs to get a scoring winger, which is not surprising.
They have to.
But once that happens, I think we'll see his fantasy value increase quite a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean,
But who knows when that'll happen, if ever.
well, that scoring winger is supposed to be Anders Lee.
Yeah, I mean, but he's a tipper. He's not like a shot taker,
Yeah.
really. He just stands in front of the net and is big.
Yeah.
But like his scoring winger right now is Jordan Eberle. And Jordan Eberle was a scoring winger like 6 years
Yeah,
ago.
I mean,
So,
look,
it's
Anders Lee has been on a 50-point pace 2 years in a row now. Again, no power
Yeah.
play points. That's kind of thing I
Right.
don't like about the Isles too, is that there's just no power play points to be had there. So to me, all these guys.
their power play system's
No,
not good.
I mean, when you look at Brock Nelson, you look at Anthony Beauvillier, all these guys that are depth players, Jordan Eberle, they're all waiver material. That's
Yep.
the truth. Like, all of them are essentially waiver material. When you look at the defense, there's only one player, and that's Pulak. And I actually think he's a little bit of
Yep.
a sleeper at 132.6, actually.
Yep.
Because he's probably going to be top power play, shoots a lot. I think he'll shoot more this year. He increased last year. Really good hits and block space as well. I really like.
no Devon Taves anymore to worry
No
about.
Devontae's anymore, which is good for him. I mean, when you consider that Pulak and Risto are going at the same spot, essentially, I would take Pulak over Risto all day.
Yeah.
All day. From a coverage
Yeah, the
standpoint.
only reason to even consider Risto there is if you're in a PIM league.
Yeah, if you're in a PIM league or if your hits are really, really suffering, given however your draft went, you took like Goudreau and McDavid and a bunch of people and Pedersen, and you just have like no hits whatsoever, then maybe Risto makes sense because you really got to make that up. But again, this is why we talk about drafting like you want to draft pretty balanced, because then you don't get into the situation where you have to miss out on a guy like Pulak that offers so much and put all your eggs in one basket for the hits category. Something to think about there. That is it for the Isles, I think.
Yeah.
I mean,
all I really had to say about Anders Lee is, he could potentially draft him really late if you need like hits
Yeah.
and shots, because his peripherals are all right. He basically feels very similar to Chris Kreider
Yeah.
to me, except he's not going to get you the power play
I
points.
think Chris Kreider's a
so
lot better. But yeah, I agree.
maybe he's somebody that you can grab as one of your last picks and then hope that he has a better season,
Yeah.
but don't expect too much on the points front.
So
Just expect hits and shots.
moving on to the New York Rangers, who I am wearing a sweater of. I am not afraid to, show my allegiance here. I feel like for the first time ever since doing this podcast, the Rangers are actually fantasy relevant. It's insane. There's actually a lot to talk about here. Whereas in prior years, I feel like you had Rick Nash, you had Gaborik, had Anisimov, like Dubinsky back in the day, and like no one. It felt like the Isles, where no
Dubinsky.
one's really a star. Everyone just kind of plays their role. It's kind of like Philly's kind of like this now, actually. Philly's a lot like what the Rangers,
Yeah.
I think, have been for the past few years for fantasy, until last year with Panarin
Yep.
and stuff. And Panarin's the place to start. I don't want to go into him too much. We talked about him a lot on the Busts episode. My point stands there. I think my argument for Panarin being drafted too high is not that he's not good and not that he's not a play driver. It's that for him to justify that top 10, top 5 pick, he needs to be better than he was last year, and he was already insane. And I just don't see the avenue to how he could be better than last year.
Yep.
So that's my take on Panarin. Then there's Mika Zibanejad. I think he's the real deal. I think if I had to make my pick at a one center that covers all my bases and I can trust and that I would take, around that 22 spot, I love Mika Zibanejad. Not just a homer.
Yeah, I think he's in for a good season, but I do worry that his enormous shooting percentage is definitely going to come down. I don't see him scoring a goal every other game.
I expect him to be more like a point per game guy. Last year he was on a 108 point pace. I expect him to be more like a point per game. He got 74 the year before that and was still a beast, given his shot totals and power play points. I expect him to be just about point per game, I think, this year, with really good power play point numbers, really good shot totals. But I love Mika Zibanejad there at 22.7-ish. So what is that, 23-ish?
Yeah.
I think that's really good value for him. And I think he could end up being a top 10 player if things go really, really right for him yet again. I don't think they will, just because, again, a lot of the Rangers were just so overinflated. But if things go well for him, he could be a really, really good asset. Then there's Chris Kreider, 163. I'm sorry, I'm not letting you talk. You can, chime in whenever you want, but I'm happy to take the Rangers from you.
I'll tell you, I do have Kreider on my list, and what I have to say about Kreider is that I find him extremely similar to Anders Lee, as I already mentioned. I think he has a higher floor and a lower ceiling. But the fact, you have to assume that Lee can find the ceiling, which I think is unlikely. Yeah. But the thing with Kreider that I find is I don't see a path for him to get significantly more power play points.
That's fair.
With so much offensive power on that team. It just doesn't need to flow through him. Yeah. Where if things finally do click on the power play and the island somehow, odds are Lee is going to be a part of it. Yeah. So that's why I think he technically has a higher ceiling, Lee, but I don't know. It's asking a lot for him to be able to get.
I think Kreider is a much safer pick there, and I think he ends up being more of a sleeper than Anders Lee because he's going at 163. I think Kreider easily lives up to that 163 pick and could be more of a 100s rank, right? Around that 1 to 120, 100 to 120 rank. And he's easily a sleeper in my opinion. I agree. I think the power play points are where he's going to struggle. I think there's also a minutes question, what happens if he gets overtaken on that left wing, because that's the thing that scares me a little bit about the Rangers. When you look outside of Mika Zibanejad and Artemi Panarin, when you look at Ryan Strome, Kaapo Kakko, Pavel Buchnevich, I'm blanking on other people, but pretty much anyone you look down the line, and I'm ignoring one name on purpose. We'll get to him. Everyone else, the issue for me is just where and who do they play? When you look at last year, Quinn changed the lines constantly. Nobody was in the same spot. It was impossible to predict where Kaapo Kakko would play one game and then where Ryan Strome would be the next. It was so frustrating. And from a fantasy perspective, it's equally frustrating. You have no idea where people are going to line up. And so I don't trust them. I wouldn't draft Kakko this year. I wouldn't draft Ryan Strome. I wouldn't draft Pavel Buchnevich because I have no clue where they're going to be game to game. I don't trust myself to make a prediction for that. That being said, there's obviously...
Here we go.
Alexei... I watched a video on this today, and I tried to pronounce it, and I got it down, and now I got stage fright and forgot how to say it.
I just say Lafreniere.
But isn't
Lafreniere.
Lafreniere?
I used to say Lafreniere, but I heard it's Lafreniere.
I think it's Lafreniere.
Lafreniere.
I think it's Lafreniere.
Lafreniere.
I think it's Alexei.
No, it's not.
It is Alexei.
There's
we know
no
that.
A and at the end. Lafreniere.
Well, in French,
it has an.
In French, they
I
were
know, but
the
even
guy,
in the French, it has an
but
R
wasn't he
sound.
saying some weird La Fina?
I'm not going to even attempt the middle part. In
It was
French.
like-
But I know that it ended with an R sound because I was always doing the A at the end.
Yeah,
and it was
he
wrong.
was doing the R sound, and then there was like a
Lafreniere. That's it.
at the end.
That's as close as I'm going to get as a devout North American good old boy.
I speak Spanish, so it's weird for me because I try to roll the R's and La Fren. I don't even know. Whatever. Anyways, he's our new hot rookie.
Say it in Spanish. That'll help.
La Frenerie. La Frenier. La Frenier. I don't know. Anyways, the point is, I actually...
That sounded like a French person imitating an American person trying to have a French accent.
Yes, it did. It did. I feel like that happens often with me because of my Spanish. I get a weird thing. Why can't there be more Spanish names in here? I do so well with those. I would crush them. We have a guy on YouTube called Bill de Iturondo. and I always pronounce his name right, and he loves it. And I feel good because normally we pronounce names wrong, and with that one, I get it right every time on a live stream. But anyways, Laugh. I'm gonna call him Laugh in this situation here.
Laffy.
I think
Laughlin.
his prospects are really good. The problem I have is Quinn's deployment. That's my issue here. Is Quinn has not shown, I think, personally, in the last 2 years, an ability to develop talent. I don't think he's handled rookies well, personally. I don't think he's developed any people well. I don't think Buchnevich has done better under him. We saw Kraftstoff struggle. So I'm not saying that Lapp is going to be bad. I just am scared to draft him at all. That's the truth.
Yeah. I basically said if I was going to draft him, it would have to be at least the 13th round of the draft.
I'm about the same way. I think he's a gamble, and one that, honestly, the ceiling I don't think is as high as people think, just because of the people in front of him. I think his ceiling is very much capped because of how high he can get. And I mean, yeah, maybe he supplants Chris Kreider. I don't know. It's really tough. I agree with you. I think after the 13th roundish is when I take him. But because of Quinn, I am very afraid of any rookie on the Rangers right now. And until I think Quinn shows us that he has an ability to develop talent, I'm not really trusting anybody except proven talent on the Rangers, which sucks to say.
Yeah.
But I think that's the truth. And I think, honestly, I think Quinn's job could be on the chopping block this year if he doesn't prove that he can develop talent. I think it's been extremely disappointing to see guys like Buchnevich flounder, see Capo Caco have a terrible season, Kraftstoff struggle. Like, I think it's a detriment. I think it's a big dark mark on him so far, and something he needs to prove this year. Now, one guy who did flourish last year was Tony DeAngelo, going at 98.3, which is what I think is way too high.
Yeah, I would have to be guaranteed he's going to get power play one in the entire season, because if he gets moved off, his floor is so low. He doesn't give you anything but points.
Aside from that, he scored 15 goals last year. He had a 10% shooting. You know what happens to defensemen when they shoot at 10% normally? They go right back down to 4% where they belong. Almost always what happens. I'd be shocked if he continues that 10% shooting. And if you take away some of those goals, his pace ends up being more like a 55-ish pace. His shot pace is fine. He was a 180, but he does nothing else outside of that. Ultimately, to me, I think Tony DeAngelo becomes especially when you consider the emergence of Adam Fox, I think he becomes more power play specialist. We probably see his minutes decline when he doesn't. He's awful on defense. Terrible. You just can't play him that many minutes. So curious to see what happens. Last year, he only got 56% of the team's power play. So I guess we'll see what he does. I wouldn't draft him at 98.3. And equally, I don't understand why Adam Fox is going 114. I just don't.
Adam Fox is Aaron Ekblad and Charlie McAvoy of this season. McAvoy finally has a reason to be drafted, but good Lord, why do people find these like decent even strength players and draft them like their power play, like line one power play?
What I will say,
I don't get it.
I will say this about Adam Fox, which is really impressive. He only played 36% of the team's power play, and he got 13 power play points. I gotta say, that's pretty impressive.
I assume that's going to come down.
Yeah, I agree.
If I'm honest.
I think it comes down.
Can't stay.
I think Adam Fox is more of like in a regular season, I want to say Adam Fox is more of like a 40-point guy pace.
Yeah. Yep. That sounds about right.
I think that feels right.
You know who I like?
Trouba?
Is Jacob Trouba. You have to think about him in a different way now. But this is the end of the draft we're talking, where he's being taken, like 130 or 140 or so. He gets extremely good hits, extremely good blocks, pretty good shots, good PIMs, and he has the potential to play power play. So he might just give you crappy points again, but he basically plays Darnell Nurse-ish with power play upside potentially. So he's something.
Yeah, I agree.
I think his ADP is good value if you need the bangers at that point.
I agree. 100%. I think he's a very interesting option. Then we move on to the goaltending. Igor Shesterkin, Alexander Georgiev.
they're not going to be on my team.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I think they're bad. It just means I'm not going to be drafting a goalie, or rather, I'm not going to be drafting Shesterkin specifically at the time when he goes in the draft.
Yes.
It's just at 40.4, he's an early goalie one. We've seen him play 12 regular season games in a division that's going to be really contested.
And mind you,
It's not. I don't think it's as dangerous as the Canadian division or some of the other divisions potentially, but like
him,
you're gonna be playing Boston and Washington and the Penguins like pretty often, and yeah, I don't know.
him and Georgiev split as well. Like, and I think they expect them to split
as well.
I think Georgiev at 184.8 is a steal. I think could be a steal.
That's a better option.
Much better option for saves, especially, and potentially good save percentage, just because he faces so many shots. I think his goals against average will be trash. But if you don't play, and I know some people hate when I use the word trash, but I'm sorry. Yeah, I think he's a good saves option, potentially good save percentage option. I'm a fan. I like Georgiev at his value, especially if you're in a deeper league. And that's enough for the Rangers. We spent a lot of time there. So let's move on to now the Philadelphia Flyers, who honestly also don't have a ton to talk about because they remind me of the Isles, in which, except they're different from the Isles, where they are just very balanced. Like,
I think the Isles are balanced.
The Isles are balanced. They're just lower balanced. Like, people matter less.
Yeah,
Whereas
the Flyers have they have some fantasy relevant players at least. Lucky for them. I think Giroux and Couturier are kind of the two forwards that I'm most interested in at their ADPs.
Yes. I think Giroux's a sleeper.
Yeah, he's like, they're both somewhere after the fifth.
Yeah.
They're 70 or something ADP-ish. I basically would take either one if they're available. And like Giroux having multi-wing eligibility and all that gives him a bonus. But I also think he's a little riskier than Couturier because he may just be seeing the effects of age at this point.
I mean, he also has had
Couturier,
2 MCL injuries. Couturier.
Yeah, well, I'm not particularly worried about Couturier for what it's worth as far as like injury.
You love Couturier
things. I do like him a lot.
You've praised him many times.
I have. He's an underrated player. I feel like Mark Stone was a few seasons ago. Sometime during the season, everybody's going to realize that Sean Couturier is one of the best NHL players.
But for him, it doesn't translate to fantasy that much.
Yeah, but
a little bit.
Stone only does to a certain extent, and people somehow are drafting him in the second round or whatever.
That's fair. I think.
But he's a good, well-rounded player. He needs to figure out the power play.
Also, my light went out. One of my lights went out, and I look like I just lost entire power in my building. But that is not the case. Just one of these colored lights went out. That's okay. Anyways, the guy I actually like the best on the Flyers, and I've talked about him a lot, is Travis Konechny. I love his position at 96.4. Love it. I think he is my favorite Philadelphia Flyer this year. Aside from
I'm
Carter
actually
Hart.
kind of worried about Konechny.
Why? What is there to be worried about?
Because first of all, he was terrible in the playoffs. But I'm worried about him shooting 17%. I'm worried about his shot totals being kind of blue.
I mean, if you bring down that shooting percentage to kind of more normal amounts, he still got a decent amount of points.
Yeah, he did okay, especially on the power play. He did well on the power play, but
23 points.
Again, you look at the postseason, no power play points in 16 games.
To be fair though, have
That's
we
a
looked
lot of
at
games
the
don't have a power play
playoffs
point.
for any single one of these players?
No, but most of them didn't have 16 attempts.
That is true. That is true.
A game.
That is true. Part of that
I would if more had. I mean, he played more. He got 0 power play points in a row more times than games Shesterkin played. And yet,
you're right.
We're reacting quite a bit to Shesterkin's 12 games.
I like Travis Konechny. I think he's going at pretty good value that late.
I want him to shoot more. That's my biggest concern with him.
And I like to see the minutes go up a little bit. That being said, I like him. I don't like Kevin Hayes. I honestly don't like Voracek this year either. I don't like him.
He's been declining year over year.
Yeah.
I think he's somebody to like pay attention to, stream in and out, but I don't think you necessarily need to draft him. I did think he was a sleeper for a while, but I don't think I put him on my list. And like, he might have a good year, but it's not really. I don't really know.
The defense,
It's also hard to tell if he's going to be playing on
Yeah.
the same line or not. I feel like they shift things around there as well.
the defense is pretty brutal.
I like Provorov this season.
You do.
He's the first time that Provorov fell right in that same bucket of even strength players with Ekblad and with Fox now. But he finally got some power play time, and he's finally doing pretty well. So I think that we may see a good, like, unfortunately, I feel like it didn't totally translate. I thought he'd be a sleeper, but everybody loves him so much that it didn't really matter anyway. And he was getting drafted high last season. So he's kind of like a relatively good peripheral guy, especially in blocks leagues. And now he's got power play upside finally. He got 16 power play points last season. That's more than he's ever gotten in all of the rest of his seasons combined. So it's a nice to see.
Yeah.
But we'll see what that actually translates to long term. He also had a high shooting percentage, so that doesn't help.
Eric Gustafson moved to the Flyers. I don't think it matters. I do think it maybe challenges Provorov for top power play if he doesn't make it click. So that's the only reason I don't like Provorov is they clearly acquired a power play guy because that's what Gustafson is. He's a power play guy. And that scares me a little bit.
He's about to be a waiver wire guy, I bet.
He is going to be a waiver wire guy.
I wouldn't be surprised if they just
You know who is a waiver wire guy, and I can't believe he even has an ADP, is Shane Gostisbehere. He is done, folks. Just done.
Rip.
R.I.P. Ghost Bear. He had a good season. He's done. Then there's Carter Hart, 40.3. Love him. I don't think Brian Elliott really challenges for starts there. So that's a good thing.
He is my third favorite goalie in most
Yes,
formats.
same.
Behind Vasilevsky and Hellebuck.
Yes, same. Pretty much the same.
Yeah, in averages leagues, you could definitely throw in some other players there, but in anything that's like, especially if it calls wins and shutouts or anything that where volume matters, I like Hart.
Yeah. Then we move on to their rivals, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Not a lot to talk about here aside from the
I'm
big guys.
surprised. I'll be honest. When I wrote down Pittsburgh Penguins, I was like, oh god, I'm gonna have to talk
Ad
forever
nauseam
about the
about
Penguins. And then I looked at it and I was like,
yeah,
a lot of players that were like really impactful were either impactful due to injury or were impactful and then were moved away or something.
And then kind of sucked after.
Yeah. Like, you don't have to worry. Like, I feel like one of the things that would have been interesting is if Justin Schultz was still on the team, right? Like, he was starting to take power play one time from Letang, and that was getting a whole weird thing. He's gone now.
He's on Washington
I feel like that
now.
makes Letang less risky. Yeah. I don't think it matters.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter at all. So starting off with Sidney Crosby going 15.7, fine. I mean, Sidney Crosby,
perfect. Yeah.
Crosby is what he is. You know, he's going to be a point per game or better person. He's a center. That's about it. That being said, I kind of like Malkin more if you're in a Bangers league. Just saying. Then there's Jake Gensel, who I think is going right around value at 31. Gensel, to me, I think I don't know if he's going to be the above point per game guy. He wasn't. Again, he got injured so early, so it's tough to say. He only played 39 games last year. So it's hard to say, like, would he have continued what he was doing? I don't know. I mean, he did see an increase in minutes.
I
love
think
him.
he'll be around a point per game.
I think he's great value.
Maybe a little bit higher, actually.
If he were available at 31 for me, I'd take him. I love Jake Gensel. I think he's right around at value.
I actually think like all of the like big power players on the, I didn't mean that as a pun, but I guess as on the Penguins are all pretty well. Their respective ADPs are good. Crosby's good. Gensel's good. Malkin is actually once again a little bit underrated going in the third. And then Letang, I actually didn't write what his down. I think it's like somewhere in the 70s.
Yeah. I think
is also pretty good.
I think Letang is a little underrated right now. I think Letang is.
I mean, I think everybody's worried about him getting hurt.
Yes, of course.
Which I guess you can't really avoid that at this
But I mean,
point.
he still last year played 61.
When's he not been
He
hurt?
played 61 games last year, 60-point pace, 238 shot pace. Was still doing well. And then you had Malkin, who went at a 110-point pace, played 55 games. Obviously, a lot of injury there. But yeah, I agree with you. I think they're going mostly at value. And then after that, really forwards, there's Jason Zucker and Rust and Zucker. We've talked about Rust a lot, I think, on the Sleepers episode. So if you want, I think, my thoughts on Rust at least, definitely check out the Sleepers episode. I think I went a lot more in depth and did better there. And then the same with Zucker. I mean, we talked about them a lot. Then we just talked about Letang.
I think the short answer is one of them is getting top power play time. I'm betting it's Rust. And even if it's not, if I had it was totally 50-50, I would take Rust because I think his peripherals would be
and
better.
I think he plays with Malkin. So
yeah,
there's that.
Zucker might play with Crosby, so who knows?
Double-edged sword. Then the only
And
guy...
I'm sure people will ask about Kapanen.
Kapanen. I thought...
I don't
see it.
think anything.
The
about
guy
him,
I thought people would
honestly.
ask about is John Marino. And my answer there is, I don't care. I don't care about Marino.
I'm sure it's, with how many hangers on from the Toronto Maple Leafs with Kapanen, we're gonna get questions about him. But I think even if he plays with Crosby and Malkin, he's gonna need top power play to really make a huge impact. So I think he's gonna be a little bit muted, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. And then in goal, we have Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith. Tristan Jarry at 74 feels...
he's being taken
risky.
earlier. He's down to 70 now.
Ooh.
So,
It feels a little risky to me.
yeah, so I agree. That feels a bit high.
I feel like...
We've seen him have good seasons. We've seen him have bad seasons. I feel like that's what people aren't really remembering is like he's not been a stud all the time. He's had struggles.
And Casey DeSmith has looked good too, so I think that they're going to run more of a 1A, 1B situation throughout the season than a true starter in Tristan Jarry, and there's true starters going around that 70 mark for goaltenders. So
the last time that we saw Tristan Jarry get the net for an extended period of time, he lost it to Casey DeSmith.
he did. And Casey DeSmith kept it for a bit and then switched. I think it's a 1A, 1B.
This is back in 2017-18, but yeah.
I think it's going to be more of a 1A, 1B situation for sure. And that's it. That's the Pittsburgh Penguins for you. So let's move on to the last team here, the Washington Capitals, who acquired today at the time of recording this, Zdeno Chara, which is interesting. And I'm seeing some rumors that they might have promised him a top 4 spot. Kind of interesting.
What?
Maybe.
I'm wondering. Okay,
so here's the thing. Here's
I don't
the
know what to
thing
think
that's
about that,
interesting is Chara did want to be a competitor. He did not want to play a kind of backup role in a way. So apparently he was looking for a place that was going to give him, a big role, a big spot. And so I think that the rumors are that Washington must have offered him something pretty juicy for him to have accepted that. So that'll be
I guess there's room on the left side, right? Like their D isn't like amazing or anything.
Not.
So
they did add Justin Schultz, who I have on this list, but it's not going to be relevant. The only defenseman that's relevant is John Carlson, 19.4, and I love him still. I still think he's amazing. I'd argue 19.4 is too high for John Carlson, but it doesn't matter. Like, he's going to blow your socks
not
off.
by much, I think.
It's not by much. It's by a little bit. I mean, it really just depends on what forward you'd get there instead. And I'd rather...
in blocks leagues, it's actually good,
it is good for blocks leagues.
He blocks so much.
Yeah, it makes sense around there for blocks leagues. But he's a beast. Nothing else to be said there. Lots of power play points, lots of blocks. Then there's Alex Ovechkin, 6 ADP. I think he's a top 3 guy. Even in standard leagues, in points leagues, in maybe not in points leagues, he's top 3 anymore. Actually,
no, not in the points league. I don't think.
Not points leagues, not anymore.
I mean, he definitely he's a borderline first overall pick in hits and
I
shots
think
leagues.
absolutely.
You could take him there and not feel bad about it. Still,
I agree.
It's crazy.
I agree. I mean, he had good shooting percentage last year. Everything was in line last year. His shooting actually went up, which is really impressive to see. And he was at about an 81 point pace. So I think he can go point per game again this season as long as he avoids injury and whatnot, which is something that as he gets up there in age, we do need to consider as you think about. And his play style as well does lend itself to a hard fall off at some point. Of course, Ovechkin has always defied those odds, but normally when people play Ovechkin's style, there is a very hard drop off. You look at Jamie Benn, for example, and I'm trying to remember like David Backes, people like that who could just have this very hard drop off where their bodies just can't keep up with the way that they play. Will that ever happen to Ovechkin? I don't know. Evgeny Kuznetsov, 62.9. Fine ADP in my opinion. I think it's a little high. It's a little bit too early.
I hate it. I called him a bust.
You did talk about him being a bust.
The funny thing is, I think there are 2 Washington Capitals that have a chance to make my roster. My roster, if I'm drafting, Ovi's one of them because if I get another pick, I'm probably taking him. Kuznetsov, nope. Backstrom, definitely not. Verona, nope.
Tom Wilson.
I'll get into that later. Oshie, no sir. John Carlson, probably not because I think somebody else will value him higher than I do. Tom Wilson would be the other.
I think he's a little bit of a sleeper.
Yeah. I do think that he probably drops in points a little bit, but I think he can still be in the 45 to 50 range with great peripherals.
Especially PIMs.
In PIM leagues, he's just so good in PIM leagues.
Fun fact. I put in Tom Wilson into a standard. I ranked him for using Dom's stuff. I took a look at where Tom Wilson would land in a standard Yahoo League. Guess where he finished in projections? Overall rank.
Well, probably like 70 or something.
Yeah, you're right. Or just around 80. And he's going at 122. So even in a standard league, ignoring plus minus, he's up there. So there's some value there with Tom Wilson, even if you're not in a PIMS league. And I feel like a lot of people sleep on him when they're not in PIMS leagues.
Yeah, right.
And
so moving into, so I'll go in a little bit more in detail about the other guys I kind of brushed off. Backstrom, I didn't check his ADP, but I think people are in on it now and realize that he was a bad pick last season. Wherever you drafted him, I think he was like a 5th or 6th round pick. It's not getting better. He doesn't give you anything but points, and he's typically, I mean, this changes sometimes, but he's typically not playing. Oh, he's actually 113, so it's still too high, but at least he's moved down like a few rounds from last season. But he's a points-only guy who's not getting enough points to justify.
73-point pace last season. I mean, it's still good for points leagues, I think. For points leagues,
it's higher than I thought,
yeah.
actually, to be for what it's worth. But there's just no peripherals there.
Points leagues, great.
He's like a 2-shot-a-game player, which is like, ugh.
And then after that, there's Ilya Samsonov, who we talked about.
And he's a center. So
Ilya Samsonov, to me, 51. To me, feels too high. It's not worth the risk. We've never seen him do a full season.
He's going even earlier now. It's moved to 46.6.
Because of the Hank news. I mean, do we know that he can handle a full season? I don't know if we could. I don't know if we do.
We don't know anything about him.
So, like,
honestly.
I don't. And he didn't look that great last season. That's the truth. The truth is,
yeah, he had moments. He had moments
that he was good. Yeah, and then a lot of moments too where like I was like, this is a rookie goaltender, and we're drafting him as if he's going to be able to play 60% of the season, 60-70% of the season. I don't know about that. Igor Shesterkin looked good. I mean, I'd rather have Shesterkin over Samsonov if I had to pick. Hot take, maybe.
I'd have Samsonov because I think he's going to get more wins.
If I'm
I'm not ignoring the wins.
Well, I may be ignoring.
I think he gets more wins and more volume, so I think I would take Samsonov. But even if he gets worse averages,
well, there you go.
But Samsonov. Vrana.
Yes, Vrana, of course. 96.
Vrana needs a couple things. He is too high at 102. I would like him if he falls later than that, just because he's a player where you can define the things that are holding him back.
Yes.
That's kind of rare. He's not getting enough minutes, just flat. And if he nudges his way into power play 1, which this is a pretty good season for them to have Oshie stop playing power play 1 and move it to Vrana. If they did that, they increase his minutes by 2 or 3, move him to somewhere between a 17 and 18 minute a game player, I think he becomes very valuable. But it's just too much gambling.
Agreed.
Like that's been the thing for like 3 seasons now. So I'm not taking that high in hoping that that all those things happen. I will stab at him late if he's around. Otherwise, I will wait until something changes. And, if I see an opportunity or Oshie gets hurt or whatever, maybe I try to trade for him if somebody's holding him.
Great. And there you go. That is your East Metro Division preview. I don't know which one's going to come next. We'll keep you guys on your toes still.
Clockwise. We'll do south.
We'll do south. Okay, we'll go south. But that is
there south? I don't even know what these division names. I think there is. I think it's north, east, west, south, and west.
I think that's what it is. Whatever. So we'll do south next, which probably includes Dallas because Dallas is in the south.
The Florida League.
Florida League. That's what it is. Otherwise, have a great new year. Thank you so much for sticking with us in this year. I hope you're all doing okay. We will catch you in 2021 now. Thanks for watching or listening. We'll see you next time.
Yep. Thanks for listening.